Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our first Lunch and Learn of 2023. Today, we are joined by the Northern Shenandoah Valley Finance Education Program, Karen Poff, who will be talking to us today about the 10 tips for financial wellness. Please let us know if you have any questions, and we will go ahead and get started.
Hey, I'm Karen Poff, and I work with Virginia Cooperative Extension. My role is really just to teach financial management. That's what I do all day, every day, for everybody from little tykes just learning to count coins all the way up to senior citizens trying to stretch their dollars. So I thank Corey for inviting me to come in and speak on this topic, and hopefully you'll get some good tips. A lot of it may be just reminders of things that you've known before, but hopefully in the new year, it gives us a fresh chance to become motivated to maybe take some actions that we haven't taken in the past. So we're going to start with 10 tips for financial wellness. But first, quickly, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Cooperative Extension in case you aren't familiar with us. Cooperative Extension is the national system of the land-grant universities, and we are here to help people put knowledge to work. There's lots of research generated at these land-grant universities, and we bring that out to the people in the counties and cities across the nation. So in Virginia, we have 125 different facilities, and there's extension in every county and city across the state. And our website is on the slide if you would like to go and learn a little bit more about us. We have education in a variety of different subject matters, especially agriculture and family and consumer sciences, and also 4-H, our youth development program, which a lot of people are familiar with. So people tell us we're the best kept secret, so don't let it be a secret for you. So on to the 10 tips. So these are some of the top things that we talk about in all of our other classes. And since we only have 30 minutes, I'm going to be hitting a lot of highlights and not going very much into depth. So if you have more information that you'd like to learn on these topics, you're of course welcome to contact me, but also you're welcome to join one of our other classes that I'll talk about towards the end. So tip number 1, know what is important to you. And of course, we're talking about wellness. And part of wellness is being satisfied with the way our lives are going. And in order to do that, you need to know what's important to you. So on the slide, you see lots of different things. Pets might be important to you. Vacations might be. Your fitness and health might be. Owning a home might be. Your faith might be. All of these things kind of represent what could be important to you. And what this research shows is that people are most satisfied with their financial situation when the things that are most important to them are where their money is going. So if there's a disconnect and you're spending your money on things that are not important to you, or maybe they're something that's important to somebody else, or maybe you're not able to reach some of the goals that you might have, then that's when people tend to be dissatisfied. It's a lot more related to that than it is about how much money there is available. People always think when I get that extra money, then things are going to be better. But it's really when you match what your money is going to that makes the difference. So tip number 2 is set SMART goals. So now that you know what's important to you, you're going to want to set some goals based on what is important to you. And we don't have time to delve into this a whole lot, but SMART goals are basically going to be specific enough that you can place a dollar amount on that goal so that you can put it into your spending plan. So whatever it is, I want to establish an emergency fund, and so I want a $1,200 emergency fund by the end of the year. So that means I have to save $100 per month. So that's a simple SMART goal that I know I'll be able to reach if I'm able to stick with my spending plan, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So SMART goals is a really a thing that can help you move from just having your spending haphazardly and making sure that what you are spending on is going towards the things that are important to you. So set those SMART goals. Then the next thing is spend less than you make. And I'm not sure I have a whole lot of big tips about this one. It's just that if, just like our federal government, if you spend more than you make, you're going to be in debt. And so spending less than you make is an important part of financial wellness and financial health, because that's what's going to ensure that you have an adequate financial reserve for the things that you need. The next tip, using a written spending and savings plan. And again, we don't have time to go over every little detail of developing a spending and savings plan, but this is what you normally think of as a budget. And I tend not to use that word as much because people are intimidated by the word budget. They feel like it's a straitjacket, it's going to keep them in prison financially, that they're not able to do what they want to do. But a spending plan is actually that. It's spending to be able to do what you want to do, to be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish. And those are things that can't be done unless you have a plan. Because if you're just spending willy-nilly, if you're not considering how you can fit your goals and the things that you need within the amount of money that's coming in, then you aren't going to meet those other things. You're not going to probably be satisfied. You're probably going to spend more than you bring in. You're probably going to have difficulty making sure that your money is going where you want it to. So that's what the plan is all about. And the basic steps are tracking your income and expenses, then picking your categories, weighing your options, meaning deciding within those categories how much you're going to spend on the different things. Take action. That means go ahead and spend according to your plan, but also continuing to keep track so that you know if you're meeting those expenses and you're able to stay within the spending levels that you set aside for those categories, and then evaluate and adjust. So no spending plan is going to be perfect. A spending plan is not going to be set it once and it's done and then it operates on autopilot. Just life doesn't work that way. You have things that happen in life that are going to kind of knock your spending plan off track. You're going to have to adjust categories. Inflation has been one of those things recently. Eggs cost way more than they used to. So either we're going to have to use less eggs or we're going to have to decrease our spending somewhere else to account for the increased price of eggs. So evaluate and adjust, and then it's a continual cycle. Then you track your income expenses and you decide if your current spending is what makes you happy, if it's working for you. If it's not working, you continue to evaluate. So an important key word in this tip is a written spending and savings plan. So I have a lot of people tell me, well, I'm just going to keep that in my head. I'm gonna, I keep my budget in my head and I stick to it that way. And really, we just can't. There's too many puzzle pieces to be able to stick to a spending plan that's only in our head. It's just too much for our brains to handle. And the research shows that when we're keeping it in our head, we're going to be juggling a lot and we're probably going to drop some balls. The research shows that when you write it down and you have a written spending and savings plan, you're going to be more successful and effective in making your spending plan work the way you want it to work. So within that tip, I'm going to talk about using a reserve fund. So I made this tip number 5 because there's one little piece of a spending and savings plan that we talk about in our sessions that really makes it work. And not very many people know about this. So it's called a reserve fund. So this is for the expenses that usually trip people up. Let's say you're going along and you pay your car insurance twice a year and suddenly your car insurance bill comes in. Well, that's a larger amount probably than you can take out of 1 month's spending. But then you have that amount and now it sort of becomes a crisis. Where am I going to get the money to pay this big bill that I can't take out of 1 month's expense? And that can happen with property taxes. It can happen with seasonal expenses like holidays or back to school, things, seasons that you have not set aside the money on a monthly basis to be able to take care of those things. So how are you going to make ends meet? And a reserve fund will help smooth this out and make this work for you. It's kind of similar to a Christmas club, the old timey way you used to save up money, and then at the end of the month, at the end of the year, you would get the money out for Christmas. So you can think of it similar to that, but it's going to encompass all of your occasional expenses. And you're going to think through the year using a chart like I have on the screen for you. You're just going to think through the year and start out in January. If I were doing this, I'd start out in January and I think, okay, my husband's birthday is in January, and I'd write down his birthday and how much money we're planning to spend on that occasion. And then I move on to February and I think about Valentine's Day, and I think about our anniversary is in February and how much money are those things going to cost. Then I move on to March. That's a biggie for us because that's when our car insurance, one of the times our car insurance is due. So I put down car insurance, how much money needs to be allocated for that. April's my son's birthday. May is Mother's Day, and so forth. June is property taxes, another big one that we gotta plan for big time. And maybe we want to take a vacation in the summer, so we put that on there. Wander through the year and try to list every single thing that would not come out of your regular monthly spending. Then all you're simply going to do is add all those things up and divide it by 12. That is the amount of money that you're going to need every single month to be able to afford all of those things you have on your list. And you can do it a couple of ways. Some people I know actually open a separate savings account for their reserve fund, and they put the money in every month. And then when they have those occasional expenses come up, they'll withdraw the money from that savings account and use for those occasional expenses. So that's one way to handle it. It works real well. Another way to handle it is just to leave it in your regular savings account, as long as you realize that those things need to come out of that savings account. What can happen is the money is building up in that savings account and you feel like there's plenty of money to spend, and you don't remember all the things that you had on your list that need to be accounted for during the year. So you feel like there's more money in there to spend. So just realize if you bulk it in with other savings, make sure you're not overspending from that savings account, thinking there's more money there than is really committed to all these other occasional expenses. So that is tip number 5, and we're about halfway through, so I'm doing all right. Wasn't sure about the timing on this, but seems like it's doing okay. Establish an emergency savings fund. That's tip number 6. Now, we're going to talk a little bit later about credit and how credit can kind of sabotage your spending plan because it tempts us to overspend. But even when we're using credit for things that are necessities, it can still sabotage our spending plan, because what happens is we pay more for those things over time if we're using credit than if we were using our own money that came out of an emergency savings fund. So let's say something went wrong with my car, the repair was going to cost me $500. If I had an emergency savings fund, I pull the $500 out, I pay for the repair, everything's great. If I don't have any emergency savings, I use a credit card to pay for that expense. Then what happens? I'm going to be paying interest on that expense. And depending on how long it takes me to pay for it, it might be a lot of interest. So if you do that very many times, you're adding a great deal to the cost of the emergencies that can happen in your life. So an emergency savings fund will take care of things like that car payment or the car expense. It also would take care of things like an illness, maybe where you had extra medical expenses, or maybe where you were laid off and couldn't work for a certain amount of time, or any kinds of unexpected things that could happen, even a pandemic and finances kind of going haywire. If you have a good emergency savings fund, you will be able to weather those financial storms better. People recommend about 3 to 6 months worth of emergency savings that can actually carry you through some time without income. And there have been times in my lifetime, especially during the the downturn economically in 2008 and 2009, experts were recommending as much as 12 months worth of your living expenses in an emergency savings fund because some people were out of work for that long. So whatever amount that you come up with, just get started. Don't let the amount intimidate you and think, well, I may as well not start because that's such a huge amount. I don't care whether it's $5 a week or $25 a paycheck, whatever, it doesn't matter the size, just get started. That will really help you to have a cushion. A lot of emergencies can be taken care of with maybe just $500, so that might be a good amount to start with. But whatever amount you pick, just get started and get that emergency savings fund established. Tip 7 is also about savings, a little more about how to save effectively, not only for the emergency savings, but also savings towards your goals or savings towards longer term things like retirement. And the key really is to pay yourself first. So what do I mean by that? Your money that you're going to put into savings is going to get set aside at the beginning of the month before you pay any of your other expenses. It's almost like putting it aside by faith, putting it into that jar. And you can see as the graphic on the screen, that money is going to grow over time in savings. And with interest rates going up a little bit, we don't like it on the borrowing side, but on the savings side, we actually are able to earn a little bit more on our savings than we used to be able to. So that's a good thing. So put that money aside by faith, because what a lot of people will do is they'll say, well, I'll just save whatever's left over at the end of the month. And surprise, surprise, nothing ends up left over at the end of the month because the spending seems to grow to accommodate how much money is in our checking account. So if we do the opposite, we say, okay, I'm setting aside $25 a month for my emergency fund every month. We automatically have that withdrawn out of our account or deposited directly if the employer will do that. Directly deposited, that $25 is not in our checking account. And kind of out of sight, out of mind, we go ahead, we spend throughout the month. There may not be any left, but there's some already in savings. So paying yourself first is a really good tip. A couple of other things about savings as far as this tip goes, it really is, it's fine to start with a small amount and work your way up. And so I have a couple of kind of bonus tips for you about how to increase the amount that you have in savings, even if you have to start small. One of those things is if you have a bill that you're paying off, maybe it's a car payment or maybe it's large payments toward a credit card balance that you're trying to get paid off, something like that, and you're paying an amount every month, and that bill gets paid off. We can celebrate, and that's exciting and all, and it's a great accomplishment, but the best thing that we can do is to continue to make that payment. And you say, well, what do you mean by that? Continue to make that payment to yourself into your savings account. As you do that, you continue to make that payment, you're giving your savings account a huge boost, and that is going to grow a lot faster and be available to meet your financial goals as well as emergencies and in the future towards your long-term goals like retirement. Another tip towards that is when you get a raise, and that raise might be a certain percentage. It might be 2%. Let's just say it's 2%. So I'm used to living on the lower amount of money, could take that amount and divide it in half and now put 1% of the raise into my savings account every month. And again, I got to pay myself first with that, put it in there first. But if I'm doing that, I'm now saving 1% towards savings. If you do that, say you just add 1% each year. Next year, you add another percent. Now it's 2% and so forth. After 10 years, you're going to be saving 10% towards your savings. So that is a big thing that you can do is add your raise. If you can add the whole thing, or even just split it in half and add half of your raise going into your savings fund. And that's going to provide a big boost and help you accumulate those funds for things later in life that you want. Tip number 8 is using credit wisely. And this actually is a whole session in one of our classes. So again, don't have a whole lot of time to go into a lot of detail, but two of the things that I think are worth mentioning in this section. One is compare the cost of credit before getting a credit card or a loan. We tend to just take the offer that comes in the mail or the offer that comes in our email box or the offer that comes from the financial institution we already deal with. And those might be fine offers, but you might be able to get better deals elsewhere. So we always use the rule of three whenever we're buying anything, whether it's a good or a service. You want to compare at least 3 places and figure out which is the best deal. And that way you're going to get the best credit terms that you can and accumulate the least amount of interest that you're having to pay on these things. Another important thing is only to use credit for things that are going to last longer than it takes to pay for them. So let's say I'm spending 10% of my income right now on credit. I might be fine with that if that 10% or 12% of my income is going towards, say, a car payment, that it's lasting longer than it takes me to pay for it. It's something that I need, and I'm sort of happy with that situation. But let's say I'm spending 12% of my current income towards credit, and what I'm paying on is hamburgers that were eaten long ago, vacations that were taken long ago, and all I have is the photo memories. Might be clothes that I bought and maybe they have worn out. I can't even wear them anymore. Those kinds of things. When we buy items, consumable items that aren't going to last a long time with credit, and then we're stuck paying for them still years later, we're not going to be very happy with our situation or satisfied with our situation. So if you stick to buying things that it's going to take longer than it takes to pay for them, they're going to last longer than it takes to pay for them, you're probably in the long run going to be satisfied with your situation. And you're also going to be spending less than you make in most cases. All right. Tip number 9. This one is really important and really beneficial to people to know how much of your take-home pay is going towards consumer debt. So how do I know how much? How do I know what amount I can borrow and still be able to repay it? Continuing on with the credit discussion. Borrow only what you can repay, but how? How do I know how much I can repay? Calculating the amount of your monthly debt payments is going to give you that information. So what you do is you add up every consumer debt payment that you have. Now, we're not talking about regular bills. Your utility bills and things are not in here. But what actually is debt? Car payments, student loans, credit card payments on balances that you have if you're not paying your credit cards off every month, those sorts of things. Any debt payment that is not a mortgage is figured in this consumer debt calculation. So you add all this up and then you divide it by your take-home pay. And for this example, I have $300 of monthly debt payments. I divide it by 2,000, which is my monthly take-home pay, and that is 0.15, which is 15%. So a 15% consumer debt to income ratio is comfortable for many people, unless your mortgage expense is really high. Then it might not be it might end up being too high for you, but 15 for most people generally is manageable. Going up higher than that is probably not. 20% is a red flag. If you go up higher than 20% of consumer debt to income repayment, then you're probably not going to be comfortable. You're probably going to starting to get stressed, starting to feel like you might not be able to make your payments or feeling like you have to juggle. So keep that around 15%. If you do own a home or have a mortgage, you're going to want to figure a different ratio that includes the mortgage, because your consumer debt to income ratio might need to be a little bit lower in order to accommodate the larger debt repayment on a mortgage. But the bottom line is borrow only what you can repay, because if you borrow more than you can repay, it's going to be causing a lot of financial stress and ultimately harming your financial wellness. last slide, and then we'll have hopefully some time for questions. Tip number 10 is protecting your information. And unfortunately, people can be managing their finances well, and everything can be going great and going smoothly. And then suddenly they're a victim of some type of fraud or scam or identity theft. And now their financial situation is not so great, and their financial health is not so great. So it is really important to protect your financial information, and everyone is collecting our data in so many different ways. All I can really tell people, I see a new financial scam in my inbox just about every single day because I'm on various listservs that tell me about these different frauds and scams. And so it's hard to give people a whole bunch of tips. I mean, I could do a whole 2-hour webinar and really not get all the information out there about how to protect yourself from fraud and scams. But what I can say quickly that can help is that you don't want to be too trusting. You want to be skeptical of pretty much any offer that comes your way and investigate it. Make sure it's a legitimate place. Make sure that the offer is legitimate. Don't do things like click on links from things that come to you, especially in email or text, because you don't know if that's a legitimate place. Even when you're searching for websites, you're trying to buy something online or such, make sure that you're dealing with the legitimate place. And there are fraudulent websites on there. There are fraudulent people on Facebook. There are fraudulent people on eBay. There are fraudulent people everywhere. So just realize that identities can be spoofed. Phone numbers can be spoofed. Even answering your old-fashioned telephone, they can be spoofing the sheriff's department number or the court number, and it looks like it's from them when it's really not. So just be very vigilant about investigating every offer and not taking advantage of anything until you are positive that it came from the legitimate source, the offer is legitimate, and that there's not any spam or fraud connected to it. And that's the quickest way I can say that, and just encourage everybody to be very vigilant about protecting your information. All right. Do we have any questions about any of these top tips? We got 1 or 2 minutes left, and I'm happy to have a little bit more discussion or answer any questions people might have. And while you're thinking, if you have any questions, I've got 2 additional slides. These are some of the ways you can connect with Virginia Cooperative Extension's financial education program in the Northern Shenandoah Valley. We have an email list where you can sign up to get upcoming program information. We have a website. We have a Facebook page you can connect with us on, LinkedIn, and a Twitter account. And you can also connect with me on Facebook as a friend. Friend me on Facebook at VCE-Karen Poff. So please do connect with us so that you can hear about other programs that we have. And these are contact information that, that might be helpful for you. We also have a 6-lesson Managing Your Money series. So if this piqued your interest and you wanted to learn more in depth about any of these topics, you can scan the QR code or fill out the survey there and let us know of your interest in that series. And then I look at the surveys and I find out where and when people are interested in taking a class, and that's how we schedule our Managing Your Money series. It'll also ensure that you get a direct email when those series are scheduled in your area. So don't see any questions at this point, but feel free to throw one in if you have that. And thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you, Karen. If anybody has any questions, you can unmute yourself to ask them as well as putting them in the chat box. But again, we do want to just thank you, Karen, for being willing to experiment with us with the Lunch and Learns that we're starting this year. I'm excited to see what else happens as we go through this year. I do want to announce that we have our next Lunch and Learn for social wellness that's going to be presented by the staff of Response. I have put the flyer in the chat box, It will be on February the 8th, also at 12 to 12:30, and also virtual. If anybody's interested in coming to that one, you can sign up through the link in the flyer.
And please do fill out the survey if you get a chance. It just feedback helps me to make the presentations better for future groups. So thanks.